From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insiders Keith Sargent and James Cratch. Let's start shopping.
Hello, everybody. Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. Welcome back to The Rant, and I am joined. I'm going to break some news on the podcast. First time breaking news on the podcast. It's award season, and I'm joined by the New Jersey Sports Writers of the Year. I got to tell you, fellas, when the ballot came out, there's a ballot for this, believe it or not. I know people right now are listening to this going, wait, there's a New Jersey Sports Writer of the Year? That's the first question. And number two, that there has to be we can't just come up with one New Jersey Sports Writer. And the third thing is, like, how do they come up with this? Well, there's a ballot. And when I saw both of you on the ballot, I'm like, this is going to be trouble because one of you is going to be New Jersey Sports Writer of the Year and the other one's going to be pissed off. But instead, how do you feel about that, Sarge?
I'm this is the first I'm hearing of it that I have to share it with Cratch, and I'm not thrilled. So, I might have to write a strongly worded letter. But in all seriousness, I mean, I am proud to there's no one who's worked harder and more deserving than Cratch in all seriousness. No one who works harder. And let's be honest, okay, and Cratch could probably speak to this as well. But the only reason why you're not the sports writer, you've been two-time running, you've won it the last 2 years, and I think there's some sort of rule that you can't win it 3 years in a row or something. So
no, this is what happened. I did to prevent myself from winning another time. I joined and nominated two of you for the stupid award. That's what happened. And then I had to vote. Then I get the ballot, Cratch, and I had to vote. So I only have one vote. I only picked one of you. And that's all I'm going to say about it, except to say I voted for Sarge.
So folks, just real quick, because we're you're way on the but let me just paint the scene. Let me paint the scene. We're at the Gator Bowl in the press box, and Steve actually got the awards because he didn't go down to the award ceremony, but he actually was handed the awards in the press box right before the Gator Bowl. So midway second quarter, I needed Politi to run some quotes, just a normal beat writer to columnist thing. And Politi not only big time me, but he actually took the two awards that were, and just put them right in front of his computer just as a show of, Sarge, I'm the New Jersey Sports Writer of the Year 2 times running. I'm not doing that, so
I'm going to
he really let it go to his head.
Exactly. And now you can do that to me because you guys are And I think this is, the fact that I voted for Sarge, I'm going to say now, because we're all about transparency. Cratch, I think that is a bigger tip to that means you got I think you are truly the deserving sports writer of the year because someone who's not in the organization voted for you. Clearly, I assume, for this to be the case.
I would assume so. Maybe it was one person, one. I don't know. No, it's a big honor. Glad to share with Sarge. When I found out we shared, I was like, do we have to arm wrestle for it now? Like, do we have to? Is there like a runoff or something? Because I've never won an election in my life. I guess I really didn't even win. I kind of won this one. So, I was 0 for 97 in student council elections and as a child.
We'll have a Twitter poll to determine the true New Jersey sports writer. All right, enough about that because we're already going to lose our rapidly diminishing listenership based on that introduction. Let's talk some Rutgers sports, which is what we're supposed to do. Going to lead off with basketball, fellas. A big victory at College Park against Maryland. Come from behind, down a bunch in the first half. Had just a tremendous second half. I watched the entire thing, and they just looked like a different team. And it feels like, and I know I'm getting 10 degrees ahead of it here, but it feels like it could be a turning point game if they can build on it. You look at the schedule now; they're 4-2 in the Big Ten. The next 4 games. Home against Iowa. I guess Iowa's better, but it's home game. At Minnesota, Maryland. Those final 3 teams are 2-18 in the Big Ten. So I get it. There's a long way to go here. They got to win the games. If they could be 8-2, 7-3 in the first half of the Big Ten season, and then you have to start thinking, okay, well, it's not impossible, right? I mean, what do you think?
No. Look, I mean, what they showed on Saturday in the second half against Maryland is exactly what this team needs. They need to be tough, and they need Ron Harper and Geo Baker obviously more Ron this time, to put the team on their back when they have to and get it done. That's how this season is going to go from here on out, in my opinion. If Ron and Gio are on and they can elevate this team, they've got a chance to turn this all around and get back into serious contention for the tournament. If they can't do that every night, I think we're going to see what happened a couple days prior at Penn State.
Right.
And this is going to be a team that basically it's 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door every other game, helter-skelter the rest of the way. The crazy thing is, if they're 8-2, 7-3 in the Big Ten, that's in like Big Ten championship contention picture at the halfway point of the regular season, which is kind of wild. So look, they still think they have a ways to go. Lafayette and DePaul and UMass all happened, but they do have signs of life. And I think that if Ron and Gio can produce the way they have, and guys like Mulcahy can step up and Cliff, they've got a chance to turn this thing around.
And Sarge, Harper's not just playing on a high level. He's playing on a just incredible level. 16.6 points a game, 6.8 rebounds, 47% of his threes, which of course has been the biggest weakness for this team forever. I mean, I don't know if he can keep it up, but he's been great.
Yeah, the one thing that, he had a similar start to the season last year and then kind of petered off late. So you do have to worry about that. The one thing I'll say about, being, putting themselves in a position to be in Big Ten championship contention, you just wonder, like, what the NCAA tournament field, whether or not, like, when the selection committee, there's a lot of teams that have had shaky non-conference seasons. You just wonder because of, how many teams had to shut down because of COVID. And you just wonder how much emphasis the committee will be putting on, the actual conference season and, how teams are playing the final 2 months of the season, which would bode well and maybe, eliminate some of the hiccups that Rutgers had early in the year. So, all good things right now. I think, they look, certainly like a Big Ten contender, but again, they're going to need to win some games on the road. And, they're beating up on the teams that they're supposed to beat to win against.
On the flip side of this, Scratch, the reasons not to be so positive, they have played down to their level of competition every game. There's just not enough depth. And I think that's the thing that's going to come back and get them in February when you play these games in the Big Ten grind and you're traveling more and you're relying so much on Harper and Gio that it's bound to catch up with them at some point.
No doubt. I mean, and even look at these next 4 games. I mean, Iowa's really good, and this is a team that they've had their wars with Iowa, and Iowa's going to score a bunch of points. They're very good on offense. Minnesota, not an easy place to play, especially at a weird, 11 a.m. tip off there. Nebraska, like one of these days, Nebraska is just going to stumble into a good effort, but with all the talent they have, they can't figure it out there. Maryland again, who knows what happened? I think one of the big things I'm intrigued to see is, especially starting Wednesday, Iowa, what's the rack going to look like after the vaccine mandate when it's a big game? Because I've seen it in wrestling. Anecdotally, the crowd does seem smaller and less intense at wrestling matches after the mandate went into effect. I'm intrigued to see how that carries over when the students are back and everything for her hoops going forward.
You really think it's going to keep fans from coming? That's interesting. I hadn't considered that. I'm just assuming that people at this point, would have gotten this done. But maybe you're right. Yeah, I mean the rack, and they're going to have that. They're going to have to replicate or come close to replicating what they did a couple of years ago at the rack for this to happen. Because they have been a much better team at home traditionally. So that would be a big factor, Sarge. I mean, we have to see if that building can be as magical as it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen some signs that, they are a different team, at home, as opposed to being away. But yeah, Cratch is right. I mean, the few games that we've been there, since the vaccine mandate, it just hasn't had the same feel. So time will tell. That'll be probably something that we'll have to focus on, as we get into the thick of it.
All right, so we got some more basketball topics here. Let's dive into true or false. Talk some football as well. Lots of good topics for you, so let's go. All right, true or false? Rutgers will win 12 Big Ten games in basketball. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Okay, you're going lower than that. Sarge, what do you think?
False.
Okay, I'm going true. I think they're going to do it.
12. Wow.
So true or false? Here's the next one. Rutgers will win 10 Big Ten games. Scratch?
True. 10 and 10.
Sarge?
Is there an 11? There's a number between 10 and 12. We're just skipping over the 11.
It's at least 10. I mean, you want to say 11? Go see. You can say 11.
I'll say true.
The attitude already changing with the New Jersey Sports Writer of the Year. Just give me slack about this.
Here's my award right here, buddy.
Good grief. All right. True or false? The key to the basketball team turning around the season is Paul Mulcahy. Cratch, true or false?
I will say true. I think if he's on and doing everything he's capable of, that really changes the team. He's a major weapon.
Sarge?
Oh, he's one of, but he's not the key.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the next one. True or false? The key to the team turning around the season is Caleb McConnell. Sarge, is that the one?
Yeah, I would say true.
Okay. True or false? The football team will have 3 new starters on the offensive line next season. Cratch, true or false?
I'm going to say false.
All right. Sarge?
False.
Interesting. All right. Well, you know what the next one's going to be. The football team will have 2 new starters on the offensive line. Cratch, is 2 the magic number?
Yes, true.
Sarge?
I'll go true.
I'll get down in a minute. I agree with you on that one. True. And finally, true or false? C. Vivian Stringer has coached her last game as a Rutgers basketball coach. Cratch, true or false?
I'm going to say true.
Sarge?
True.
I agree. It's true as well. It's just a fascinating situation still unfolding with the basketball program, which is a wreck. Let's start with the offensive line, though, because this is the major off-season development for the football team is that Greg Schiano's gone shopping. You know, it's exactly what we talked about him having to do to improve this team. Kratz, you were skeptical that you could rebuild an offensive line through the portal. He's certainly given it a go. I mean, you're bringing in 4 guys. I'll run through them really quick. Mike Ciafroni from Colorado State. I don't know if that's pronounced it, Mike. I apologize. J.D. DiRenzo. We're getting a lot of times, which is good. Sacred Heart. Curtis Dunlap and Willie Tyler from Louisiana Monroe. You did a nice breakdown online, Kratz. I mean, what are your thoughts, and why do you think it's only 2 new starters?
Well, first off, Ciafroni, I'm not, again, apologies, Mike. He's a long-term, guy. I think he's a guy who was a converted defensive lineman at Colorado State. By the way, I'd love to hear some of his stories. I mean, when you get recruited by Steve Adazio and then follow him to Colorado State, you've probably seen a lot. But he's a guy who has, I think he's sort of like, a Troy Rainey, an Ireland Brown, a guy who's relatively new to the offensive line. He's got 3 years of eligibility. I think he's a guy who's probably a long-term investment. I think DiRenzo, St. Joe Hamilton kid, I think is probably the best guy they got. Willie Tyler, it's his 4th school. He was committed to a 5th school. It's a big step up in competition level. And then Curtis Dunlap's a guy who fell out of the starting lineup at Minnesota and was in the transfer portal in October. I think that, I'm skeptical about rebuilding an offensive line because I've said this before. It's like NFL free agency. The guys who are in the portal are in the portal for a reason. These are not necessarily, surefire things. So I think of the group of 4, if you get 2 starters in 2022, that you did really well.
And DiRenzo's the guy because he's 20 D1 offers. He's an adult too. He's an old kid. He's gonna be a 6th year, right? I mean that's why you're picking him.
Exactly. He's a grown man. He's I know it's FCS, played at a high level. FCS All-American. He's big. I think his versatility. He could play left tackle and allow you to bump Raekwon O'Neal inside. He could play one of the guard spots. I think he's the guy that I really think, okay, that guy's going to be in the starting lineup somewhere on day 1. The other 3 guys, I think it's very much wait and see.
All right, so take me through what's going to happen now, Sarge. When you have this many offensive linemen in the program, and it's really a remarkable number now. There's got to be some attrition. There's got to be some guys leaving. I mean, a freshman class coming in as well. I guess this to me signals that they're going to try to redshirt all of those guys, including Jacob Allen, the number 1 player in the state coming in. How do you see it shaking out?
Well, I mean, Schiano, I can guarantee you, come mid-March when we're talking to him for spring, he's going to talk about competition, and he's probably right. Competition should be better. When you have 30 guys, 30 offensive linemen, in the program or something to that effect. It's a startling number. You would imagine the cream would rise to the top, and they'd be able to sort through and have a Big Ten caliber offensive line. That'll help. The one thing, again, that the transfer portal, so far so good, but Elijah Clark, that just popped earlier this week. So I think we're living in an era where you just never know, and Rutgers is not immune to it. I wrote about it the other day about the amount of guys who had varying degrees of success after they transferred from Rutgers. So I think we're living in a period where almost on any given day someone could Rutgers could land someone or they could lose someone. So it's going to be one of those things that where come mid-August or when you're really getting ready for a season, then you're going to need a scorecard to kind of sift through exactly who's going to be ready to play for Rutgers.
Cratch, who of the existing guys are you convinced will be solid starters next year? When spring training opens up, they've got a solid guy at right tackle. Give me the breakdown.
I think Holland Pierce, to me, I think he's locked in at right tackle. I think they're very high on him. He is the guy who they think has the ability to be kind of a special player. If Reggie Sutton is healthy, which is a big if, because his knee injury was very serious. If he's healthy, he was the best lineman in the program for 2 years. I think he is a guy who has a spot at one of the guard positions if he's healthy. After that, it gets dicey. I mean, I think Raekwon O'Neal would be the next guy, but I don't think, he's a guy who got benched for 2 weeks during the season when they were doing all the mixing and matching. I don't think he's guaranteed a starting spot. Gus Zelinskis has an inside edge at center, I think, and Brian Felter too. Felter kind of revitalized himself down the stretch this past season, starting the last 2 games. But we've seen with Nick Crimmin, they'll move some guy over who's never played center before if they have to do that. So I would say the only guy I think is locked in is Holland Pierce. If Reggie Sutton's capable of playing, I think he's pretty close to a lock. After that, I think O'Neal, Zelinskis, they've got a shot to play. Ireland Brown, I think they're highest on of the converted guys. But those starters are definitely going to have a chance to compete. And I agree with you. I think all the incoming recruits, they're redshirting.
Right. It's just fascinating because Greg Schiano has identified, and this is modern football, folks. This is it. This is the way you're going to try to build teams now. No one's going to wait for you when you take over a program for you to have your offensive lineman as redshirt juniors. You have to find him some way, and he's doing it. So it's sort of fascinating to watch. All right, the other items, Mulcahy. Look, when you saw the swing of that team, when he had an awful first half with turnovers, he was just struggling. It happens. It's college basketball. And the way he played in the second half, not only distributing the ball well, but hitting the open shot and really making that offense flow. I mean, if they can somehow bottle that, it seems like that to me is really the missing thing for this team right now. Especially when he's going and distributing the ball like that. I think that offense looks completely different. Sarge, you went with McConnell. So what's your theory?
McConnell, just from what he gives you, the intangibles, the defensive end of the floor, and when he's going, what you're going to get out of him. He's always going to give you an effort on the defensive end of the ball. But when he actually is giving you some offense, they're a different team. So, I always look at it as he's the X factor on any given night. Like if he's playing at his high rate, that they have a chance to beat anyone. So, you can make a case for. You can even make a case for. Gio in some ways. Like we've seen good Gio, we've seen bad Gio. So, in a lot of ways, in order for Rutgers to have any chance, you need to see good Gio.
All right, good stuff. Let's dive into some insider questions. As always, appreciate you guys on our texting service for subscribing. Even things can slow down a little bit. We still have a lot of interaction on there. It's been great this year. So thanks for your questions, and let's go. All right. Here's a very basic one. How many more transfers will we see in the next 2 weeks? And at what positions will Rutgers get players? Do we have any idea? I know transfer portal like trying to predict the weather. Kratch, do we have any insight on any guys who are coming in?
Yeah, so obviously they're pursuing Steven Stellanos, who's a tight end at Lafayette. I think they need a tight end. I wrote this in my mailbag today. I know they're high on Victor Konopka. Johnny Langan showed a lot. They've got the Higgins kid coming in. They need a veteran tight end who can move bodies in the run game and be a threat in the passing game, especially because now, we still have questions about the receiving core. I also think they need a veteran linebacker. I wrote this. They need Drew Singleton. Obviously, he went off to the NFL and he forewent his final year of eligibility. But they need that type of guy that, not necessarily a difference maker, but a solid, steady veteran who can be a leader in that group. And a guy who, I think the challenge is going to be with all those young linebackers they have and the fact that we expect a lot of 4-2-5 looks. A veteran linebacker who comes in the portal is probably going to slowly lose playing time as the younger guys develop as the season progresses. So I think that's going to be hard for them to sell it, but they kind of need Drew Singleton, but obviously he's off to the NFL.
All right, another portal question, Sarge. What's going on with Elijah Clark? Is he really leaving just to go play with Chestnut at Syracuse? 4-star defensive back from Camden. I think he actually was going to factor into what they want to do this season. Was that a big surprise, and what's going on?
It surprised me. I mean, it seemed like he was, relatively close with Fran Brown, and he showed some positive signs. Was banged up a little bit too, but I know the coaching staff was high on him. So I mean, surprised me. But again, I think we're at this point where I don't think fans could be surprised by any of it. I mean, these kids, coaches, across the board, we see it. I think that more and more they understand what it is. It's a business, and I with the transfer portal where it makes it easier and easier to seek. It's not even playing time. There's probably other factors mixed in that none of us know. I will say this: if there are going to be some defections, now's the time, because it's right when kids they're enrolling the start of the spring semester. So now tuition's paid for. So, we saw it with Jonah Jackson and Nakia Griffin and Max Anthony a couple of years ago. We've seen it, in other examples as well, that if we're going to see some transfer portals guys, it would be now where tuition's paid for. You can enter the transfer portal and know that you can still attend classes, at Rutgers for the next couple of months.
All right, this is a good question from Rocco, one of our loyal subscribers. What happened to Coach Panagos? I always thought he was a great defensive line coach. Should I be worried that our new line coach does not have any experience coaching that position? And I really do think we need more defensive linemen. I kind of agree with Rocco that the DL could be the new OL coming through with the need to have more bodies there. Kratch, what happened to what do we know about the situation with Panagos? What do we know about the new line coach? And might as well just break down all the coaching changes that we are aware of at this point.
Yeah, so I think with him, I think it's a couple things. One, Marquise Watson, the new defensive line coach, is a rising star who's, all indications are he's going to be an impact recruiter, which I think they needed. They want to add another big recruiter on the staff. I mean, I think especially when you're going to go through this every offseason where there's going to be a dance where Fran Brown might get a head coaching job elsewhere, you want a guy like Marquise Watson who is in many ways similar, the way you hear recruits talk about him to Fran. I think with Panagos, look, I mean, he hasn't landed anywhere else yet. I don't think the possibility of him being in another role at Rutgers has been ruled out yet. It's been mostly mum. The one thing I'll say is, remember 2020, he missed the season with knee replacement. I think, he's had issues with his knees, so it could be one of those things where it's a little bit of health issues as well. But I think, look, in terms of Marquise Watson not having experience, I wouldn't worry about that. This was a guy who was a standout, he's sort of like Charlie Noonan. Marquise Watson was a defensive line coach at Bryant, out of Division I school, between his grad assistant year at Rutgers and going to Ole Miss and being an analyst there. So he's coached defensive line before. They've, Schiano knows how to coach defensive line. They've got a bunch of experience, Valone, obviously, on the offensive line, Noonan, Western. There's plenty of help on the defensive line. I disagree with Rocco. I think the defensive line might quietly be a strength moving forward. They've got to be significantly better as a pass rush unit. But Marquise Watson's inheriting a very young, talented group. Aaron Lewis played really well. Mohamed Touré, I think we've seen, he can be an impact guy. Kenny Fletcher's coming in. They're high on Wesley Bailey. Keontae Hamilton, we all know they are very high on. I think he could be a star. You've got Ifan Maja back. You've got Maya Nahanatu back. You've got veterans inside. There is a lot of talent in that room, not something we could have said a couple of years ago. And I think it might be the perfect matching of a young coach and a young group that's ready to take off.
It's a great point you make about the coaching the line, Cratchit. And I've often wondered this, Sarge. It might be interesting to hear your thought. What percentage do you think a position coach's job in a college program is coaching the position versus recruiting? I mean, if you could stack up the importance, it's got to be 80-20, right? I mean, heavily weighted per recruit.
It all depends. I mean, there are some, offensive coordinators who come in like, Mark Whipple, for example, who just got, went back, left pit.
Fridge,
there's some guys,
of course.
Yeah. There's some guys who are just coach offense. And, I don't think Sean Gleason, Cratch might correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if he's grinding it out, and spending, 50 nights of the year, on the road recruiting. I think, but by all accounts, I think he's, the guys that he's targeting, I think he's pretty good at recruiting. So, it all depends. It depends. I mean, there are some guys who are natural recruiters, like Jeff Hafley when he was here, or PJ Fleck. They would spend a lot of time on the road, and yet they were, by all accounts, they were, pretty good position coaches as well. Like I said, it all depends on the coaches. Jerry Kill, another example. Ralph Friedgen, another guy who was not on the road racking up Marriott points. I'll put it that way.
I think it depends on a couple things. One, I think Sarge is right. Sean Gleason, a guy who might not be considered a recruiting ace, but he was a pretty big reason why Gavin Wimsatt is here. So that's what the coordinator is supposed to do, land the big fish guy. Obviously, the head coach has to be the guy at the end of the day. He has to be the guy that closes out. I think with some position groups, it's probably 80% recruiting, 20%, development coaching. I think other positions, like for instance, offensive line, I think that's a position group where you need a guy who can coach technique and X's and O's. Right. Whereas other position groups, you can have a guy that basically just rolls the footballs out, but he's bringing in the players. I think that there's a healthy balance in some positions. But I do think that you never want to go way too far to the recruiting side because then you're going to struggle on field. But I also think going back to, to the Ash era, I think they went way too hard to the X's and O's guys. I think that was a thing every year when there'd be turnover. People would tell Chris Ash, you don't need every guy to be like a Phil Monk. You need to get some players too. I think Schiano's done a very good job of balancing the recruiting and the coaching.
We managed to go to Jacksonville and not run into Chris Ash either. Sorry, that was a tactical mistake on our part.
Hey, I talked to him.
I thought you guys were gonna have dinner with him once you found out that I wasn't in the state. I thought that was open.
He did mention that. He's like, how's Politi doing? How's Dunleavy? How's Duggan? All these other guys who I used to work with. Never mentioned Crash though. I don't know what that was all about.
Yeah.
Oh,
any thoughts on that?
Hey, I hope he, yeah. I'm gonna.
Teasing, man.
It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't shock me.
He didn't mention. I'm sure if he mentioned anything about Politi, it wouldn't have been good. But I don't think he had any hard feelings with either me or Crash.
How's Politi doing?
No. I mean, he had hard feelings with me. I mean, which is what I'm sorry. He had a 1-11. I got on the beat, and he had a 1-11 football team in New Jersey, and he got 10 guys arrested. I don't know how we're going to go up from there, guys. So
Good times. I always love when we do those little detours. Those were the fun days. Not really. All right, the basketball question. Please talk about Jaden Jones's disappearance from the lineup. Hope it's not too late. Without Harper and Gio, also what will become of our team next year without any scorers. So this is these tie in together pretty well. I think it's clear the way his rotation's been for Peichel. He doesn't trust his bench to the way he would like to trust his bench. Jaden Jones, I don't know. I mean, it's a great question. I liked what I saw of him in limited times out there. It looks like he's active defensively. He can shoot. Cratch, any thoughts as to what happened to him?
I think it's just what you said. It's just they don't trust the bench. These are young guys, and look, there are plenty of reasons to have concerns about next year. But I kind of go back to what we've talked about in the past. This might be the way it's going to work with Steve Peichel's program. They're going to be cyclical, and maybe next year, maybe having Gio this year saved them from having a down year. But if Gio's gone and Ron's gone, next year might be a little bit of a step back or situation.
Right. Next year he's got to do the Schiano thing, go into the portal.
He has to go into the portal next year.
Yeah.
Which is, which I think is the big key, because now it's like the guys who built the program, Gio, Ron, etc., they're all gone. And if you don't trust the bench now, then you shouldn't necessarily defer to them when it comes to talent acquisition out of the portal next offseason.
You can't. You've got to get impact players, absolutely, which is what he deferred to. And I understand his thinking. He couldn't guarantee playing time when you've got Ron, Gio, okay, all those guys back, but now he's got playing time he can offer. So that's going to be how he solves the problem for next year. But of course, worrying about next year right now is not something that Steve Peichel can afford to do. All right, we got a lot of questions this week about the women's basketball program. It's an all-time low, and it's on Pat Hobbs to fix it. What's the talk behind the scenes as far as moving on from Coach Stringer and finding a big-time coach to fix the program? I mean, Sarge, it's a disaster. There's really no other way to put it. And I really do. If you're looking for who to blame, I mean, you gotta blame the architect of the program. When you're the head coach, I understand her motivations, but she signed a 5-year contract, disappeared from the program. Days later, this is what happens. This is what happens when the leader, the most visible person in the program, steps aside, and it looks like this could be a winless Big Ten team.
So I'll say this, okay? Because when you're talking about health, it always goes back to this and her reasoning for stepping away. In some ways, look, folks, she might have been vindicated, because at the time when she stepped away, we're talking like September, October. She actually stepped away and left in April when we were seemingly doing okay. But over the last 2 months, with the amount of cases, in a lot of ways, she was not only concerned about herself being, in her 70s catching it, even if you have the booster, or, you're vaccinated, it could be pretty serious. But also her daughter, again, who we've written about, has been, dealing with a serious, illness, since she was, 3 or 4. So that's first off. That being said, where they're at right now, I think, it's big time college sports. So at some point you have to say, well, what's best for the program? So at some point, my expectation is that Pat Hobbs will have a conversation, and whether it's with Vivian, maybe with her representation, her agent, and say, listen, we have to come to some sort of conclusion here. We have to move forward. There's too many, players in the program, and and fans of the program that need answers. So at some point, I expect them to have that conversation. I think it'll happen before the end of the season. And look, I mean, you asked me true or false. Has she coached her last game? I think she has. I from the people who have talked about it behind the scenes, none of them expect her to make this triumphant return. So I think, at some point Pat Hobbs will have a conversation. I think they're going to have to, obviously, financially, she's owed 5 years, 4 more years after this. So I think, they're going to go, they're not going to go away, silently as far as not expecting a full payment. I don't think Rutgers has any appetite to give her a full payment, because all things considered, might get a little ugly there. But, at some point, I think they're going to have the conversation, a serious conversation, and try to move forward as a program.
I guess I just don't understand the some point then. I mean, if it's at some point, and we all think it's that way, Democrats, do you agree? I mean, why have they not had that conversation? What are we waiting for?
I mean, to be blunt, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just money. I know it's Rutgers, but it's just money, And the truth, too, is that we got a ton of questions, and I'm not criticizing. We got a ton of questions about the team and their recent struggles on the Rutgers Sports Insider. There always seems to be a heck of a lot more intensity about being angry about the team's fortunes on the internet than there actually is in going to the arena and supporting the team. So I think that also factors into the thing. Look, the program is just they lost their top 5 scorers off of last year's NCAA tournament team. They tried to rebuild it on the fly through the transfer portal. Obviously, it hasn't worked the way they thought it was going to work. That being said, this is a team that went 6-24 a couple years ago and then rattled off 3 straight 20-win seasons. Would have been 4 if not for COVID last year, knocking out all those gimme non-conference games they play. So they have had a really bad year in recent history and then rebounded. I think there's 2 issues here. One, the fact is that they've recruited really well in recent years. They have not retained most of those players. Diamond Johnson, Maori Davenport, all these big-name players have come here and then gone elsewhere, which happens today in transfer portal. That's been tough for them. 2, they're just kind of treading water at this point. And I think Sarge is right. I would think at the end of the year, they have to figure out what they're doing. They have to move on. But at the same time, too, I don't think Rutgers is going to force her out. I think she's going to leave on her own terms. The biggest thing I will say is when she does retire, they're going to have to completely start from scratch. Like it's going to be a complete rebuild, I think. But you're going to have an incredibly attractive job. Like I don't think Tim Eatman's going to get promoted to the job. I don't think Rutgers is going to go out there and hire some, mid-major. Like I think Rutgers is going to have significant interest from Power 5 sitting head coaches, Power 6, you want to count the Big East, that have had significant conference and national tournament success. This is a Big Ten program and a fertile recruiting ground that Rutgers has not recruited New Jersey well in years. Coaches are going to say, I'm going to, that's one of the big things on Pat Hobbs. That whoever the coach is has to say, I have a plan to go to the Shore Conference and start getting those star players who are going everywhere else. So I think it's going to be a big selling of Big Ten program, fertile recruiting grounds, state-of-the-art, immaculate facilities, and there's not many women's college basketball programs that have a proven ability to pay a coach $1 million salary a year. I think they have a chance to go out and make a grand slam hire, and they might steal a coach that will shock people. And I think that has to be their approach going forward. But first, they have to handle this very delicate situation.
I agree with everything you said there, except the will not force her out part. I'm sorry, tell me if I'm wrong. I think this has got to, that's how this has to end. They're not going to they can't just wait for her to decide. She's got 4 years left in her contract. This is not sustainable. This is just not it. This is not it's a big time college program. I understand everything you said about her health issues. I get it. She signed the contract in April, disappeared 5 days later. It's just not, this is not, Pat Hobbs has to do something about that. He just does. He can't go into another year like this.
And he's not the first AD who has really struggled with forcing her out. He, if anything, he put in her contract that she was going to be there was supposed to be some sort of it was written in stone basically that when she retires she was going to be an ambassador to the program, have some sort of title where she could still get paid and be involved with the program. But I don't know. And at this point, again, it's going to be a difficult conversation. I know from everything I've heard, people, who are her, the people who represent her, from a financial standpoint, some of them are won't go away lightly and just roll over. So I think there's going to be some difficult conversations from that end as well.
All right, that's our women's basketball take. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We got one more. Can we do a wrestling one really quick, Gretch?
Sure.
Matt wants to know, and this will be a good segue into what else you can tell us what's going on with wrestling. Matt wants to know, what's the difference between all the wrestling rankings, like Intermat, Flow Wrestling, etc.? How do they get used? And as a fan, which should I care most about? All right. I will learn something here too. Take it away.
There's a lot of wrestling rankings out there because wrestling fans like to click on rankings. It's a profitable endeavor on the internet. In terms of which one is there's no set, industry standard. We use Intermat on NJ.com. I think Intermat's, been around the longest. They're, traditionally the most respected, even-handed. Flow. There was a time period where we used Flow Wrestling out of kind of convenience because at the time, Flow Wrestling had a deal with the Big Ten Network, so when a match was on BTN Plus or BTN, the Flow Wrestling ranking would be used. So I basically just made the executive decision that we're going to use the ranking that people see on TV, our readers watching the match. They don't have that deal anymore. Now it's Intermat is used on BTN, so we use Intermat. But for the most part, Intermat is the most respected one. The rankings don't factor really into anything. There's a completely separate RPI ranking that the coaches do, the coaches panel that impacts how they seed the national tournament and hand out at large and automatic qualifier bids to the conferences. So not to get too far and be deep in the weeds, but basically there's a bunch of them. You can choose whichever one you want. Intermat, I think, is usually the most respected, longest established, so we go with that.
Diving in, I just noticed this, diving into the wrestling schedule. Michigan, the tour of Michigan is coming up. Michigan State on Friday, Michigan on Sunday. Does that mean we'll get a little Nick Suriano against? Is that going to happen? Is that really a thing?
It is believed to be a thing. I'll break a little news. I am planning to head out to Ann Arbor this weekend.
Really?
I am headed to Ann Arbor to see, just to be in the building. Nick has not, we tried, of course, we asked, but so far Nick has not done any interviews with the media. Michigan, it's crazy. Michigan might win a national title in wrestling this year, and I don't think anyone out there covers Michigan wrestling. It's really quite incredible. But no, yeah, we'll go out to see what happens. I expect Rutgers is going to put Dylan Chauver on the mat, and I would expect, Suriano's been wrestling for the Wolverines in the other dual meets. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't go out on the mat. Obviously, he would be heavily favored. Nick is the favorite right now to win the national title at 125 with Spencer Lee of Iowa out for the season. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's kind of a crazy thing. It'll be interesting. It's good enough that I figured I'll take the day trip out to Ann Arbor and see what happens.
Has he done an interview since? The Olympics? Try anything? Has he talked to anybody at all since he left?
So he spoke to the New York Times and about a story about athletes, Olympic athletes who have COVID issues.
Okay.
Not much there. I think he also did like a Sanjay Gupta CNN podcast about COVID, but didn't say much there. And then there was a Flow Wrestling documentary, like a little mini movie about him. Okay. And he sort of talked about Rutgers, but not really. So he is kind of the international man of mystery. No one knows exactly what's going on, but Scarlet Knights are planning to put someone out on the mat, and I think they expect him to be there too.
That still stands as one of my most memorable interviews of a Rutgers athlete, not because he said anything interesting, but because he's so trying to think of the right word that would be polite. He was just standing there the entire time with his hands out, like he was trying to size me up to take me down. So I found myself kind of instinctively doing the same thing where I was like, is he going to make a dive for my legs? Because while I weigh twice as much as he does, I'm sure he could kill me with his bare hands. But yeah, that was interesting. There's my wrestling. There you go. There's my wrestling insight, folks. Sarge, what do you think? Is that?
I think you're selling yourself short. I think you might be able to take him at least for I don't think it would be a pin. I think it would probably.
If I got on top of him, it would be hard. I think that would be the hard part. I could not.
I think it'd be competitive. I think.
If I happen to fall in the right way, he might be in the mix area. All right. What else we got? Anything else before we sign off? Is there any other topics we have to cover here? No. kind of quiet.
Can we spend another hour? I'm sure the fans will love to listen to just talking about us as far as our
more journalism award talk. I mean, people love when journalists talk about awards, right? We should absolutely do another half an hour just on that. That would be great. We can break down the Nevada Sports Writer of the Year whenever they're talking about it on their podcast. I'm sure, right? All right. On that note, let's sign off. Everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks to Devco, who re-upping their contract. Another year of their support. We appreciate Chris Palladino and his crew for sponsoring us. And that's it. We'll be back in a couple weeks to talk more hoops. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep. Scare You to Sleep is a podcast where I tell you scary stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. You can find the show on Acast or wherever you get your podcasts. Sweet screams.